Life is nothing but one massive struggle, literally all the time. It is quite literally eat or be eaten out there, but accompanying that is the lesser thought of be eaten while eating. Taking a third route like a huge loser, parasites in their natural form are just that. Parasites.
Apologize!
They take from the host's own stores to feed themselves and gain protection from the host just by existing. This is why you have to cook bear meat thoroughly, because there's lots of parasites in them. With humanity, we have long struggled against parasites in all forms, and for the most part, we have eradicated them in first world societies. Granted, this may be why our allergies are so horrific, but who's to say? Well, probably some research in the future will tell us that, but moving on. Anyhow, compromised planet colonization due to no parasites being there aside, the reality is these animals are everywhere. We just typically have medications for them. But the other side of this, as made mention with the allergies, are parasites truly just parasitic, or do they have some dual purposes? In the events of hellhole, the men who would be infected by a species that would use their bodies as incubators and then explode them if they, kind of ran across any problems, they would retain control of their bodies, but they would still know something was internal to them. So what exactly is this parasite? Can we label it as such? Why does it cause men to explode? And could it be somewhat symbiotic? Let's discuss that in today's episode. But first, this episode is sponsored by Raycon. Go to buyraycon.com/Roanoke today to get 20 to 50% off site-wide. That's right, you'll get 50% off everything on Raycon's website when you go to buyraycon.com/Roanoke. Raycon is disrupting the electronics industry by producing premium wireless audio for half the price. Each earbud comes with a 32-hour battery life and a multi-point connectivity so that you can pair two devices at once. Along with that, I personally like the active noise cancellation, which at the gym really does block out a bunch of people making racket so that you can focus in on your lift and get swole. Plus, considering how comfortably they sit in your ears, they're a fantastic earbud to leave in for long periods of time. And now you can show off your unique taste with the protective case covers. I went with the granite one because stone anything is always the superior choice. So if that sounds like something you'd be into, then go to buyraycon.com/Roanoke today to get 20 to 50% off site-wide. That's right. Again, up to 50% off everything on Raycon's website when you go to buyraycon.com/Roanoke. All right, let's get back to it. But as always, I want to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoy this content, then please leave a like, as it really does kind of help out the channel, and subscribing lets you know when I post, allegedly. Also, come join my Discord, you giant nerds, so that we can all watch movies together that eventually I do cover on this channel. It's pretty lit. Links are all in the description for pretty much everything. So we kick off our story with it being 1814 in a Serbian territory. We're going way back to Napoleon's soldiers who just got pushed out of the Ilian provinces, and I'm sure there's gonna be somebody from the area who's like, that's not how you pronounce it, but hey man, I'm from the southeast of the US, like, it is what it is. So everyone is on the verge of starvation, joy abound. As one disheveled man walks around with a musket, he appears to be looking for something. His compatriot is with them, but they clearly have no idea where they're supposed to be going or what they're really looking for, so as they pick a direction, just kind of go with it, they hear a twig snap. A woman begins walking by with a horse. It's a trap. The younger man then takes the horse as the woman begins noping out of there. They too leave with more nutritional needs for it. Wilbur! Continuing their wonderful trek through the woods, they return to their men's encampment. Taking a knife, I guess they aren't really using this thing to escape, they're just gonna try to eat the horse. Of course, I know absolutely nothing about the woman they purchased the horse from, but why not just purchase a cow? As they raise the knife on old Seabiscuit here, it then explodes into a mass of tentacles. Chasing the men down, it does something to them, but them being French, there's this whole thing. Anyways, so we now jump over to a man with a nice truck at a lake. Actually, I do believe that is a 1990 King Cab Nissan truck, D21 to be exact. You see, once upon a time, Nissan actually was attempting to compete with Toyota, Ford, and Honda. And back in the day, reliability was the actual name of the game. Chevy's in there as well, concerning reliability. And I mean, way back in the day for Ford and Chevy, because it's been a hot minute. Now it's all planned obsolescence at 100,000 miles. And also, if you drive a Hyundai, they throw a rod at like 50,000 miles now. Like, this is for real, I am not joking. Regardless, these trucks are completely legendary. As we zoom in on a random sitting there, we jump over to a work site. The men talk about working, as evidently in the supervisor trailer, it's also freezing. A man comes in and then tells the group that the road is under a river, or maybe, the river is over the road. Doesn't matter, works all the same. John talks about how they shouldn't have drilled in Serbia, and Emily doesn't know when they're actually gonna break ground to begin their drilling because the conservationist scientists need more time to look for some almost extinct rabbit in the area. The resident scientist then chimes in talking about how there is a whole world underneath the ground that we have never seen, which is very true. Actually, I believe it was Kurzgesagt, they just did a video on that discussing all of the microbiomes in the soil. We've known for quite some time that life was down there, but I guess the shocking point is just how much. allegedly there is more biomass down there than there is up here, which brings into question the concept of life coming from thermal vents in the ocean, because allegedly that's how it's hypothesized, that's how life got started on this planet, by amino acids being formed in the vents, then kind of seeding the oceans with these, which then the ocean was then struck by lightning, and this caused more complex molecules to begin forming and then eventually life. Which would be funny considering we attribute a similar idea to how Frankenstein's monster was brought back to life. I know, right? How douchey to call it Frankenstein's monster. Yeah, actually, Roanoke, it's Frankenstein who was dying. Sorry, I'm dealing with a cold right now. I think I'm like, it's not going well. Anyhow, but with this much life underneath the soil at crushing depths and heat, kind of makes you wonder if it didn't actually start internal to the planet itself. Really, within my short lifespan on this planet, it seems like every couple of years we find like more and more about this world that we live on that flies in the face of what we thought we knew. It's kind of interesting. Anyhow, so she goes on about medicine as John talks about where they were told to drill. They're there to frack oil out of the ground. Scientists then talk about picas being good as they can kind of indicate like the process, how it's affecting the environment or not. Which also, another fun fact, considering he found all these microorganisms below the soil, and this is just what I've read, so the oil purists out there don't like freak out, but allegedly we don't actually really know where oil comes from, and somebody fact check that in the comments because it's just what I've read. The point is that we assume it came from like dinosaurs and organic life, but really it could have just as easily come from microorganisms. And it's interesting to think about because if it does come from microorganisms, then that means it's possibly like a renewable resource, at least to a degree, and we are pulling it up from the ground where all these like microbiomes exist. Very, very strange. But if it did just come from dinosaurs, then it is incredibly finite. The point is, some people attribute it to be almost like diamonds, how it's like, oh, there's only a couple of diamonds, and that's why when you get an engagement ring, it's this expensive, but really there's, like, diamonds are about as common as granite rock. It's everywhere. Anyways, that was completely off topic, so the cook comes in and then he tells them what they will be eating. Looking gift horse in the mouth, this guy is going to be making some gourmet food, and evidently, according to Emily, the crew doesn't want it. Like, give it a chance, that sounds really good. So the cook then asks about the conservation people as he's interested in the woman named Sophia. Getting back to work, a drill then moves across the area as we may finally be doing some work. The conservationist people are there looking for endangered species of rabbit, as made mention, which has been slowing everything down. Back in the supervisor's trailer, the scientists come back as they hand in her report. They ask about the row, but they are trapped there for another day at least. Sophia then thanks Emily for the chance to come out there, and she evidently loves to cook, and she's interested in the cook, Teddy, as well. So Sophia heads to the kitchen to give him a hand, and outside, are we like drilling or what? They begin setting this thing up for about 10 years now, as then they finally start to do something, but as soon as they do, they immediately stop because they smell something organic, determining it not to be methane, and then fire up the machine once again as they kill it once more, seeing smoke come out. Hearing something down below, they try to figure out if it's a gas break, as the scientist says they want to know what they are drilling into, so they need to cease. Teddy then gets backed up by Sophia to go and bury some trash. They pull the drill out as everyone once again stands around. Teddy goes off with Sophia and then starts hitting on her, which is Giga Chad behavior, and then they pull up the drill. Well, that doesn't look like something that's supposed to be coming out of the ground. Nicola then checks it out, and he doesn't think they're bunnies. Wow, you don't say. Over at the trash pit, Sophia then talks about her professor. See, Sophia's got a degree in biology, absolute Chad, with a specific focus in parasitology, which is actually not a bad focus, although virology is really the cool one, I guess. And again, I'm partial to it, but I'm sure my own STEM biases don't affect my judgment. Digging the hole, Teddy then tells them to stop as everyone is majorly concerned by what they found. Looking at it, they realize whatever it is stinks like the drill stinks. A pair of human hands then emerge as the guy looks around, speaking French. The man begins yelling, "Help me," in French, so they just cover him back up. Back at the supervisor's trailer, Emily and John don't know what to do with this guy. I mean, I just gave you guys a perfectly acceptable solution to dealing with the French. They have no signal, no accessible roads, no way to call out for help, and Emily says that they need to keep him warm and safe, while John elects to lock him up to keep themselves safe. Not because he's worried for any particular reason, but because he's French. Emily says they will dump this guy off on the Serbians as they don't want to deal with it, which is an excellent idea. Leave the problem to those who started it, the Europeans. So everyone continues to not work, but getting paid to do so, it's a pretty sweet gig. Granted, I think this is just how Europeans exist anyways. They've got an excellent vacation system out there. Heading into the abandoned building, they give the Frenchman some water as he's not looking so hot. Being sick right now, he feels like how I feel, I imagine. And I've also heard people ask why YouTubers mention they are sick during videos. It's only so you know that this is why I sound like crap. Otherwise, you get a ton of questions about why you sound different. I had somebody at one point ask if I used an AI that learned my voice. It's like, no, dude, I just feel like crap. So the man continues speaking to them, but only Teddy can sort of understand. Nicola then asks Teddy to translate and explain himself. Hearing French, the man then gets up as a worm emerges from his nose. Well, that's probably not ideal. Nicola then freaks out, asking if anyone else saw that. The man continues saying something is inside of him. Emily arrives as he tries to talk to her, but again, language barrier. He's speaking formally to Emily as she's old, evidently. The man then begins saying he's dead as everyone exits the room except for Teddy. Nicola begins telling the group something came out of his nose. Nicola also doesn't know what it looked like as he speaks Serbian. He says it looked like meat, but alive. They agree it's probably just a worm, as Sophia says they will grab some samples. Sophia then heads to go grab a kit as she goes and gets John. Taking a sample for the man, a tentacle then emerges from his ear as everyone saw the same thing this time. Teddy then goes to get the man some food as Emily elects to babysit the Frenchman. John then heads out to go get some food as the man continues just speaking French. Nobody understands you, bro. He really is committed to speaking a dead language, isn't he? Classic. Getting a drone shot of a building, we jump over to a grilled cheese being made. John says the French guy is off. You don't say. Teddy then says the French guy is asking him to kill himself. John then mentions how he doesn't want some parasite crawling in and out of his holes. Agreed. John is taking the aggressive approach. Headed back to the French quarters, John feeds the guy as Emily relents and then leaves. Handing the sandwich to the Frenchman, a culinary masterpiece known as the grilled cheese, he begins eating it. The Frenchman then requests the knife as he says, why don't you just use the knife on me? Tired of waiting, Frenchie then grabs the knife from John as he turns it on himself. Holding it up to his neck, the parasites prevent him from doing anything as then they emerge from his mouth and eyes. For reasons unknown to this day, scholars haven't been able to figure this one out, John then grabs the dude to try to strangle him. Why? The French mistake then grabs him back, subduing John. In the process, the parasites begin emerging from his face. But more specifically, from the tail end. Oh, sweet lord. This immediately goes into the mouth of John. The demons are coming inside him, as he is now infected with his parasite. That has gotta taste like pure ass. The Frenchman then begins rapidly aging as he flatlines out. So this will be explained later, but we need to kind of get to how this actually happens, which is kind of like, we're gonna go over that here in a minute, so just hold your horses. So back in the eating quarters, Teddy says, this feels wrong as John walks in saying he doesn't know if he's okay. Heading back to the Frenchman's quarters, he is completely desiccated. Finding John's knife, Emily asks how it got there, and John's like, I don't know. Great answer, brother. Emily then asks if John touched it. No, John got bad touched though, I'll tell you that. So John then begins lying about what actually happened. The smell that they had been played with that was coming out of the French guy is now coming out of John, as Emily asks if they need to put it back where they found it. Emily then says that they're gonna wait on the authorities to kind of figure this one out. So the scientists come back and tell them that they found something as Nicola asks why John smells like that. They say they need to keep the Frenchman warm and safe so that they can check his vitals. Looking at them knowingly, they're about to kind of find out something totally hilarious that is at all not their fault. They then tell them to open the door as the scientists head in. The scientists are just as alarmed as everyone else about how he desiccated so fast. That night, in the only warm area apparently in the entire compound, Tank Top Man offers John some coffee, but he doesn't respond. John continues looking at his nose as Tank Top Man asks what's up with him. John then pulls out a picture of his wife as Tank Top remarks the French guy is also screwing with his head as well. John then says, I think the French guy is just old, like another century old. Tank Top doesn't believe that as John says, well, I'm infected with something. Nicola now talks about the DNA of the French. Also, all I'm saying is if you pull like a 200-year-old guy out of the ground and he's alive, and then you have one of your coworkers be like, yeah, I think I'm infected with the same thing he had. I'm not hanging around in that room with that guy. That's all I'm saying. So Nicola now talks about DNA of the Frenchman. He was just your average French person. The skin itself contains something foreign though, which is very interesting. There was a presence of a eukaryotic cell, but not his own. It was a protist known as a dinoflagellate, typically found within giant clams. Also free floating, just so you know. But within the clams, the protist is typically sheltered within the shell, and this kind of is a pretty good arrangement as the protist provides nutrition. So it's a symbiotic relationship. Nicola then goes on to say humanity is invading billions of years through the soil, and something below their feet must house these protists. Whatever is down there is living, and they drill directly into it. So first things first, let's discuss the relationship, and in doing so, we need to learn about what dinoflagellates actually are. Dinoflagellates are considered protists. They are single-celled free-living organisms. They are eukaryotic cells and are going to be located within the oceans usually. I say usually because obviously they have symbiotic relationships with giant clams, or at least they used to. What makes them useful is the fact that dinoflagellates are both photosynthetic, but can also consume other cells. Being that they are photosynthetic, they will provide energy to the clam in exchange for using the clam shell for shelter, which kind of makes you wonder, does the word shelter come from clam shells? or just shells? Or does shell come from shelter? Don't know. This species contains a few tail-like whips, which can obviously propel it through an environment, but this is where the term flagellate comes from. Now, you may be wondering, why would this be up on the surface and not within the oceans? And I'm glad you asked. Roughly 200 million years ago, at the end of the Triassic period, basically the ocean levels were roughly about 300 feet higher than what they are currently. As a result of this, most of Europe would be covered in a shallow sea, and Serbia was no different at this point in time. Because of this, some fossils left over can be found that show sea life was present even in mountainous areas, which makes more sense because as the ocean levels would recede, some aquatic species would become trapped in that area that were once just small islands, now becoming a ridge around the sea that they were locked into, until eventually that dried out and they were either forced into the soil to survive or they would just meet their end. So now back to the protist in the skin, as I believe the desiccation actually makes a lot of sense here. When a person is infected, which is what we were about to see, the dinoflagellates are simply a co-infection. The original host is the preferred host, and this is the creature that is infecting the human or the horse. When a person is infected, tissue is just tissue, so it seems. The protist will then enter the skin of a person, and remember, dinoflagellates are also photosynthetic, but can also eat cells as well. So heading to the skin, this is the most preferred location because they would be exposed to the sunlight. As this species conducts its photosynthesis, this will in turn fuel the surrounding skin with nutrients. However, internally, the person is essentially running on fumes. Some of the energy that the dinoflagellates create is then given to the skin cells in that area to just barely keep them running. The body itself must also have nutrition supplied to it in some capacity to keep the internal systems running, such as the brain, lungs, heart, but again, it's all on fumes. It seems that the dinoflagellates also need to remain connected to the original infecting organism. When the organism leaves, the dinoflagellates appear to have some sort of bond severed, which results in them either going through apoptosis or turning on the organism that they are in. This would seem to indicate that the initial infecting organism may have some hormonal control over the dinoflagellates. And this is likely what that smell is. People are perceiving this hormone as stench, but this is communicating with the dinoflagellates not to break down the host with the infecting organism being in it. When the creature leaves, the dinoflagellates are also just going to probably turn on their predatory ability, which means they immediately turn on the skin cells that they were fueling. As a result, a mass reaction happens as the body is then quickly broken down. And this would indicate that likely there are more dinoflagellates in the body than human cells, given how quickly this can happen. John continues explaining to Tank Top about the thing that came out of the Frenchman's nose and mouth and other areas of his body that he just happens to leave out, as Tank Top continues to be the Chad as hell. He's like, you know what, John? Strangling is really the only thing that you can do with French people. Okay, I'm probably gonna get demonetized for that one. So John then says, whatever was in the Frenchman went into John. Maybe discuss that with someone else there, brother. Tank Top then informs him, I can smell you, as John can taste whatever is in him and the whole room stinks. Tank Top then asks if the tentacles came out the other side of the digestive tract as well. Jumping over to the scientist, Sophia says the DNA seems to indicate it belongs to an argonaut, which is a type of octopus. And here is why I believe the dinoflagellates are related to the infecting organism, which the beans have been spilled already, is an octopus-like creature. Symbiotic organisms can have impacts on one another. For instance, domestication of animals in some ways can be seen as a type of symbiosis on a macro scale. When humanity brought cats into the home, while there's this running joke that cats have not been domesticated, this is not true at all. Their brains have shrunk 25% since interacting with humans as we provide safety, shelter, and food, eliminating the need for these animals to have to work out problems. And along with that, we have also eliminated threats that would kill them off in higher numbers concerning the dumb versions, which may or may not be orange. As a result of this, which try not to look too hard in it concerning humanity's potential own future, their brains, which are very expensive investments for the body, have been decreased in size. On a micro level, you can look at our mitochondria, which, as we all know, is the powerhouse of the cell. And if you don't know that, how are you even breathing right now? Which, fun fact, we are all now manually breathing. Anyways, a long time ago, a cell seems to have engulfed another cell to consume it, but rather than break it down, the mitochondria was producing so much energy, the cell then kept it, and we have those within our cells to this day. It is known that the mitochondria is not human DNA, but contains its own snippets, which, much like the cat brain, have been considerably decreased as well, because the cell is no longer free living. The same can be said for dinoflagellates. It may be that they have coexisted in the octopus for such a long period of time that their genetic coding has been altered to the point that it needs to be in the same body as the octopus, and when it's not, they lose all direction and consume everything around itself, leading to the end of the original host. In fact, you can see this with human cells. It does not live outside of the body because the hormonal control necessary to cause the cell to basically behave in a way that secures its survival is predicated on hormonal signaling. So the question would be why, which it doesn't really appear to be a self-defense measure, but instead it appears to be something similar to how a mother octopus will prefer to eat itself after laying eggs rather than leave them and hunt. Octopus are apparently just hardcore for presumably no reason. So much like how the octopus sacrifices itself for its offspring, it seemingly does not have an issue doing so with others when it moves on to a different host. Interestingly, however, it does not always move on to another host, only when threatened, except for, I guess, no, it was threatened when the French guy, because John did try to strangle him. So because of this, it would choose to stay within one person, and this would be symbiotic to a degree. The dinoflagellates it provides fuel the host's body. However, it itself is not fully symbiotic, given it will sacrifice the host, which in turn makes it parasitic. This is a complicated relationship given that there are really, technically speaking, two infections happening simultaneously, but one cannot be without the other. So Sophia goes on it's a love triangle. So Sophia goes on suggesting they must have hit a brood chamber when they drilled, as they found evidence of an egg case. Tank Top then tries to clarify with John what exactly happened. Tank Top says he will arm wrestle John so that the parasite sees that he's stronger and then jump to him because he doesn't believe him. Tank Top then beats John instantly as he jokes about getting the parasite and how John needs to go take a shower, as then he gets punched in the face, which turns into a fight, with Tank Top actually mostly winning. Sophia continues to talk about the Argonaut, and how in the egg case the male will come by and then break off his gear, which then the female hangs onto until she's ready to fertilize the eggs. Damn nature, you scary. The man was essentially inside of the egg case, as then they asked whose sperm the Argonaut was taking. John and Tank Top continue to fight, with it concluding as the Argonaut exits out of John and then attacks Tank Top, who then falls down completely bodied. Nicola then says the man was not hosting the eggs, which would mean that the man was a mollusk. Not likely, brother. I think you're kind of messed up on that one. So Nicola then says they saw that thing in the Frenchman's nose. With the Frenchman gone, though, that means the body is no longer sheltering the mollusk, which means it's somewhere else. Which, again, they call it an octopus already, so I'm not really sure why they're calling it a mollusk. This is a cephalopod. But glad we stuck through that. That night, as one man sits inside the Nissan King Cab truck, see, these bad boys came with either a 2.4 liter or a 3.0 V6, so while obviously the 2.4 was not really as powerful, they still had about 134 horsepower, or 153 horsepower with the 6-cylinder. Now, considering they were also really light, this made them powerful enough to get the job done, but also made them pretty sweet off-roading rigs if you want to put them together. Plus, the 2.4 liter was more torquey, so if you set that bad boy into first gear, it would crawl over anything. While the D21 was no Tacoma, mainly because I'm just partial to all Toyotas, this truck was still an absolute beast in terms of reliability. So anyways, as they sit in the D21, the Serbians complain about how there's nothing to do. Well, you could always get attacked by an ancient species, I suppose. One of the workers then asks about the Icky Sticky as they spark it up for breakfast. Broham here hogs the green, however, as the other keeps requesting it, as eventually he gets to kind of, I guess, take a puff. So he asks his co-worker about how his mother died of cancer, and he also states that he brought a force multiplier so that he could shoot some cans. Meanwhile, John then drags Tank Top out in the middle of the day without getting caught somehow, away from the work site to dig a hole to bury him in. Pulling him into an abandoned building, the D21 makes its way over there by happen chance as they were checking on the road. Walking out, John then greets them, asking what they were doing there. As they go to tell him, they see that he has blood all over himself, and looking over, then spot Tank Top Man as the worker pulls a force multiplier on John. The co-worker inadvertently takes out one of his friends in the process, as John then explodes with the parasite running away. So based on what we see, let's talk about the meat explosion for a moment. Later on, when Danko tries to take himself out, his arm will move, preventing him from actually taking the shot effectively. Along with this, it seems the parasite will react when threatened. This would seem to indicate that to a degree the parasite is interacting with the human nervous system, but also it must have the tentacles in the limbs as well. In order to interact with the nervous system, there must be a nervous system that is actually within the tentacles that can, kind of interact. But it's known that the octopus essentially have more than one brain. The arms will move autonomously from the central brain as there is a neuron node at the top of the arm, and because of this, the octopus, and it is an arm, not a tentacle, can have these nodes basically control the arms by themselves without input of the brain. Now, obviously, these nodes would need to interact with the human nervous system or the horse nervous system or really any other nervous system it comes across, and they would need to interpret the information coming in. In this case, it can move the arm before a human can take a shot, and this would indicate that some of the arms must reach into the brain and are interpreting information from the optic nerve. Judging by the eye that we will see later, the octopus does in fact have sight by light. However, the nodes that it has in its arm will interpret the information. If a human sees aggression towards itself, the octopus will also see it and react. This reaction, considering it's going from a neurological hub in the arm rather than the brain, is likened to the spinal arc in humans. So like when you grab something hot and then let go of it almost instantly before you feel the pain, this is actually caused by your spine making the decision to let go, not your brain. The sensory nerves report to the spine, which the signal being sent is, I'm in constant pain, help me, help me, help me. Christ. The spine will then make the executive decision to release the thing so that the damage is lessened. Then the brain will register the pain, which is actually pretty wild. The neurological nodes in the arm do the same thing. It's likely surprising that the person bursts apart to the octopus as well, which in turn appears to agitate it. This meat explosion is likely caused by the tentacles all emerging at once with great force from the person. It appears as though everything is mostly still there depending on how long you've been infected for, and this determines what degree you appear like a skeleton at its conclusion. In those relatively newly infected, there are less dinoflagellates to break down the person and thus less desiccation. So looking under the truck, High Times over here gets infected. Nice going, brother. Could have just shut the door and rolled up the windows. But electing to not go out like this, he tries to take himself out, but each time his hand moves as the parasite will not let him destroy himself. The rest of the workers arrive to wonder what he's even doing. Emily then takes the force multiplier away and does not follow his request to take him out. Finding meat on his feet, he says it's John's blood. He tells them that he blew him away into tiny pieces and then tells the rest of the group who all is gone. Approaching what is left of John, the worker, well, he's not looking so good. They then check Tank Top, and as discussed, he's gone too. But then they try to figure out what is wrong, or what was wrong with John. Emily tells the workers to go back to base, leaving Nicola and Emily. High Times over here then tells them what happened as they ask why he was trying to take himself out. He reports back that he is now infected with whatever it was. He asks if he smells, the tentacle then comes out of his eye. No, yeah, bro is definitely infected. Whatever is in that worker has very little interest in any of them as it's already found a host. Picking up the pieces of John, that's pretty gross. Heading back to the worksite, they decide to head out by foot to try to make it back to the main camp to get help. Teddy doesn't like how the infected is being treated, while Emily says they need to let the scientists do their work. Emily says Donko is not going anywhere, as one of the workers says they will give him a mental pill to make him feel better. Okay, Luca gets told no, but Luca says, well, it is going to happen. They are talking about dispensing lead into the brain if you didn't know any better. So Emily also asks, who's going to do it then? Luca gives Emily 1 hour to come up with a better plan, otherwise they're going with Luca's plan. Heading over to Donko's holding area, Emily asks how big it is. Phrasing. He says it's small. Also phrasing. The parasite is trying to fill all the spaces it can, at least finding in his body. Phrasing. He says he's totally boned. Yes, I agree. She asks if it can hear them talking, and he says it can really just feel you. Before Donka could pull the trigger though, John burst like a piñata. It could tell he was about to get wasted, and it was angry when it was released. Donko says it isn't happy about being out in the world. Over at the scientist, Sophia then makes a discovery. Looking through a book, we then jump back over to Donko. Emily says this thing responds to aggression, but it doesn't respond to females. The parasite does not want to infect women, it wants to infect men. It feeds off only men to incubate within them. Sophia and Nicola then come back to tell Donko he's going to be legendary. Donko says he doesn't really want this thing in him. As they examine the tissue though from the wounded organism, the DNA evidently doesn't lie. The creature chose the Frenchman to fertilize the egg initially, which is a bit odd. But she ended up succeeding. The premature offspring then grew within the man and took shelter in Donko in order to survive. This would mean that to a degree, this octopus is using half of the genetic information from the animals that it infects, which means possibly that is how it's able to interact with the horse nervous system and the human nervous system. Now, obviously, this is a bit strange and would not happen at all considering the genes and gene loci would not link up properly. So it could be that this species lives haploid and then may just take on extra information from the animals that it infects in order to interact with those nervous system. So basically like 2% of information pertaining to specifically neurons is kind of taken in. But this same creature took shelter in Donko in order to survive. Nicola then starts talking about like some serious Resident Evil nonsense about nourishing the species until it's ready to live outside of him. Donko says, take him out and it's all his. He doesn't want this thing. Nicola says no, as Sophia says it is a parasite. Nicola dismisses Sophia, as Nicola also says he will defend Donko. I mean, somebody just punched this nerd. He can't be that strong. He's a professor. So outside, the worker team is about to enact their plan, which I am sure won't create a clusterfuck of a situation. Emily, Sophia, and Teddy then head outside to discuss as the worker team arrives. Luca and Tim are going to walk out of there. 30 kilometers out there is a village. They're going to take Donko to the police station. Emily says they can leave, but the professor is guarding Donko. Luca says they will take care of Nicola. That's not really a problem. I mean, he's just one, like, yeah, it shouldn't have been a problem for anybody. Tim then asks if Teddy can make the chicken hanjin, I think that's the way you pronounce it, before they leave. Sophia has a knife. Teddy doesn't have a force multiplier, but the workers are pretty much ready to take down a small village. So Emily informs Teddy this wasn't a negotiation, it was just them saying what was going to happen. So Emily read the situation pretty well. Cutting Donko free, Donko doesn't care as long as it's fast. Ivan then freaks out, saying Ivan is now infected. Donko says a virus sounds a lot better than what he actually has, and as someone currently fighting a virus, no it doesn't. I hate these things. They tell Donko it's time to go as Ivan keeps freaking out about touching Donko. They assume it's a virus, not a parasite. Emily then says to give Donko some space, like lots of space. The group then heads out as they walk to the village, unless this is really just a cover for them to take Donko out, and then they will be back. Teddy now talks to Sophia about if they are really just taking out an innocent creature. It's not the creature's fault, but it's also not a bear's fault for attacking humans who see a meal. Typically, they will run, but if they don't, humanity kind of has a habit of taking out things that take us out. Walking towards this village, they then start pushing Donko. Like, look, he's still kind of like your friend and or coworker. He's not a prisoner here. They discuss how they're going to do this as they agree on a firing squad. Donko says to give him more space as this is not a virus, it's a monster. They all begin to laugh at him, and again, why? For some reason, they just don't believe him. So as they raise the force multipliers on him, Donko then walks over to a tree and firing a shot, we jump over to Nicola. Or Nicola, not really sure why I pronounced it that way. They have him trapped in the gulag. So the shot they fired at Donko missed, however, they hit him this time as he explodes because he's hit. Everyone is a little shocked because, what was that? As the group kind of walks up to check their handiwork. Looking at him, he's nothing but a pile. The group then heads out to hunt whatever just blew out of Donko. As they search, another worker appears infected and is on the ground. He begins to laugh at them as he was actually never infected, but then they hear a noise, and then he is entered and infected by the creature. Ivan takes forever to fire as Nicola gets angrier and angrier back at base camp. He says Earth is finding a way to renew itself. I'm not sure what bro is going on here about. Like, the planet is ours. Nicola says it's two highly intelligent beings merged into one. How exactly? This seems straight up like a parasite. Like, I assume this octopus is relatively intelligent, but look, I don't see any statues that it's built, so I think humanity, it's trying to piggyback off us. So Nicola talks about how he would be honored if you were infected. Well, you may just get your chance, buddy. Emily then asks how many eggs octopus lay, which apparently are thousands. So back at the coworker group, one guy then domes himself, releasing the creature, indicating there is a time frame needed before it takes over your body. As Ivan goes off on his own, the creature then jumps on him, infecting his meat suit. Raising the force multiplier, Ivan then explodes, leaving Tim as the creature then nopes out of there. Crawling up her pant leg, it realizes she's female, so it bails out as Luca then takes a shot at Tim, who he assumed was infected, but instead, she was not, so he just basically shot his friend. Bummer. She then looks up as the creature now approaches Luca. So back at the drill site, they have released Nicola as they agree they need to walk out of there. Luca approaches the group having been infected. Nicola asks where the living beings were as Luca then just kind of ignores him and walks away. The group now begins their walk out of the area towards this alleged village. Nicola asks how Luca is doing and then continues questioning about the parasite's features. Luca elects not to say anything, leaving Nicola totally hanging as Nicola kind of assumes Luca is infected at this point. Luca says that they didn't keep their distance from Donko and everyone else is dead. He kind of goes on to say it is a monster. Nicola then says, well, I can help you. Realizing his infection is going to persist, he says he cannot go home to his wife and offspring. Nicola says, no, you just need to wait. It will leave the womb when it's done forming. Yeah, you explode. Luca says the water is a nice way to go, which I've heard when you breathe in, like when you're drowning and you breathe in water, it's euphoric for about 3 seconds, but the panic of having to breathe in water, I don't know, man. It doesn't sound like a nice way to go. That sounds just as bad as burning. Luca then tells Emily to tell his wife that he drowned because he was never a strong swimmer anyways. Heading towards the water, Nicola continues to protest, but it falls on deaf ears. As Luca enters the water, everyone just sort of watches. Submerging himself entirely, Nicola goes towards the water, followed by Sophia, and as they watch, Luca just straight explodes as the tentacles emerge. Sophia says it's time to go as Nicola gets grabbed, as now Nicola wants to kill the creature. Sophia accidentally slices Nicola by accident, which gives his guts some fresh air as the creature then enters through his guts as Teddy then runs away, leaving the two women. Tentacles begin to emerge as it exits and then realizes Emily is not the desired host. It begins looking for Teddy as Sophia and him are running away. It catches up with him almost immediately as we jump forward with Sophia sitting with Teddy. The newspaper on the ground talks about the mysterious oil rig incident and thus concludes Hellhole. So the last thing we need to discuss is the feasibility of this and what this creature really is. Judging by the fact that it's an octopus, which is a cephalopod and not a mollusk, I'm not really sure why they call it a mollusk several times, this will put it as fairly intelligent. It appears this particular species of octopus has likely been in the area for some time, and much like the African lungfish that buries itself during the dry season in mud and mucus in order to survive the drying up of their waters, this species may have existed in the same way. Creating an area in the ground, whether the water levels began to drop or this brood chamber would keep them alive is unknown. However, it should be noted that this species is also accomplished on land, more so than what we have seen with other octopus who just kind of like slide their way across. This species appears to have developed enough muscular strength in their arms to gallop across the land. This would indicate that this species is actually only semi-aquatic in nature and has developed the ability to survive on land for some time. This will put them on a similar level to amphibians, able to survive on land for extended periods of time, but relying on the water to keep their skin moist. As a result, they were able to survive below inside of the eggs until ultimately they would infect land animals in the area after being discovered. And it could also be that since they are being fertilized by other land-based animals' sperm, or at least the eggs are, this might be causing them to change in some ways, which in this octopus it may make it smarter, whereas like the horse octopus is why it kind of galloped. Maybe it had horse DNA. The French were simply those who stumbled across it after the horse was infected. It is unknown if the woman at the beginning knew that her horse's infection was present, or maybe she just wanted to get rid of a horse that stunk to high heaven. Now, what is the possibility of this happening? Exceedingly low. Parasites typically target specific hosts, and you're talking about interspersing not just different species, but different genus, different families, like DNA. It's not going to work. So while there can be some instances of parasites ending up in the wrong host, typically this will affect their fitness and sometimes actually even prevent them from reproducing entirely. I believe the octopus gestating inside of males is doing so not because it's simply reliant on the sperm of males, but because naturally that may just be the chosen host. It may be that young actually gestate inside of males in their own species, like with what we see with seahorses, so testosterone levels that are higher are naturally chosen. This happening in real life would mean this species would have to adapt at infecting all species more so than just gestating within its own, and along with that being able to read the neurological systems of the body and exist within them without injuring the host. Coupled with this, the body would also not have to have some like major immunological reaction to the dinoflagella. It's absolutely invading the body, which, let's be real here, is highly unlikely. Either way though, this thing infects you in the worst way possible. And you know what? I think maybe I'd try to take myself out too. Hey guys, so my new merchandise is finally launching for Halloween, like this shirt right here, which is pretty sweet, and a coffee mug, of course. And also this shirt. Wow, would you look at that? Amazing. Also, that's me squatting with a coffee cup and a shirt, and then that is Professor Furface, and I have hoodies. So if you would like to support the channel, check out RoanokeMerch.com. But anyhow, I want to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, then leaving a like would be great of you, and subscribing is a great way to stay up to date when I post. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, and Roanoke Games, as well as Roanoke Tales channel link in the description. But speaking of patrons, I want to thank mine real quick. First, I'd like to thank our Astrophysicist, Death Dancer, and Feather. Thank you guys. Next, I'd like to thank our scientists, Dakota23, Invictus Echo, Lucian Dragon, Metric System, and Virix Hellstrom. Thank you guys as well. And the rest of my patrons, I appreciate you guys, and you are absolute ballers. All right, that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I'll see y'all in the next one.